1 year ago today, I stood here before you and tried to describe what it is like to give so much of yourself to the mission, the service, and our country. I talked about what happens when our people leave, when the boats are moored, the aircraft are chalked, the tools are stored, and the decks are clean and ready for inspection. It is then that our people deal with the reality of their lives, their responsibilities to themselves, their families, and their country, and many times privately. And many times they struggle, as many still do in the Gulf Coast. It is then that the Coast Guard Foundation rescues the rescuers. You look out for us, you make sure our folks are okay. Your work strengthens our service and our families. You help build our future. There's a saying, no exercise is better for the human heart than reaching down to help another human being. If that is true, the Coast Guard Foundation has a big heart. Your contributions have been tremendous. Scholarships, recreational equipment, computers, special events for our Coast Guard, and everything you've done for me to support me since I became Commandant of the Coast Guard. Thank you. I'd like to close with a short story about my father. As many of you know, my father's a retired Coast Guard Chief Petty Officer and a World War II veteran. He lied about his age and came in the Coast Guard when he was 16, and I was born while he was underway on a high-endurance cutter. I wish he could be here tonight, but we tried to get him here. We have a family commitment in Texas, and it precluded his attendance. But since he isn't here, I'm going to give him up. What we try to keep as a family secret is my father's love for singing. Anytime, anywhere, any place. Be in a restaurant, in a car, he'll just break into a song. Embarrasses the grandkids. This made for very interesting cross-country trips as we moved between duty stations. With limited radio reception in those days, the trick was to entertain ourselves by singing. I think you probably all have done that. But given the number of transfers that we've gone through in our lives, this allowed for the development of quite a repertoire. In fact, by the time I learned to read, I knew all the verses to Semper Paratus by memory. But one of my father's favorite songs was released in 1942. It became the first true country western crossover hit. It sold 4 million records in 1942 and topped the hit parade. And to this day, it is a haunting country anthem about war and patriotism. The title of the song was, "There's a Star-Spangled Banner Waving Somewhere." Somewhere in this case meant heaven, or a kind of Valhalla, where heroes go when they die. The singer longs to join the fight and says in the second verse the following lines, "In this war with its mad schemes of destruction of our country fair and our sweet liberty, by the mad dictators, leaders of corruption, can't the U.S. use a mountain boy like me? God gave me the right to be a true American, and for that precious right I gladly die. There's a star-spangled banner waving somewhere. That's where I want to live when I die." The Coast Guard found that mountain boy in Clellan, Washington. His name was Douglas Monroe, a signalman. Monroe volunteered for duty in an assault force assigned to land in the Solomon Islands. In September 1942, he led a group of landing craft which placed 500 Marines ashore on Guadalcanal. Later, the Marines came under intense fire from Japanese forces and were forced to retreat to the water's edge with no option for escape. Monroe led the landing craft back to the beach and in the face of withering fire, evacuated the Marines and their wounded. As the last boat departed, he placed his boat between the fleeing craft and enemy fire, returned fire, providing cover until he was mortally wounded. His last words were, "Did they make it off?" Well, Petty Officer Monroe, they did make it off. And every year, the United States Marine Corps celebrates your birthday. There's even a cutter that carries your name. One last thing, Petty Officer Monroe, you never knew. You earned the Congressional Medal of Honor that day. And you certainly are in that somewhere. And there is a Star-Spangled Banner waving. Pass on our regards to Ray O'Malley and Marvin Perrette. They are in good company. Semper Paratus, God bless America, and God bless the Coast Guard Foundation.